Hey guys, sorry I'm a little bit late. Took me a while to figure out that you go into StreamYard via your phone and not by your desktop. So that just took a little bit of time to figure that out. It's definitely a different format to the way we normally do um, live streams. So we are going to have Stephanie on. She's standing by. Let's just have a look at who's here. They actually say you shouldn't have YouTube on while you're on StreamYard, which sort of makes it difficult to keep track of what you guys are saying. Just want to see if I can go in on this. Just give me a second. Okay, I can't get in that way. Okay, let's see who's here. Nisi, good to have you here. Sharon, good to see you here as well. Penny at Paper, Paints and Pen, uh, good to see you. Madeline, also good to see you here. So this picture behind me is actually taken in Auvers. It's sort of probably right outside the cemetery where Vincent van Gogh is buried, right next to his brother. So if you basically looked over the wall of the cemetery, you would see a wheat field directly behind it. And then I actually lay down sort of on my back in that wheat field, had my phone sort of kind of against my chest or just like very low. And then I just took it up, and that's where this picture was taken. And so it is, wheat fields are certainly part of the scenery and part of the, why is the screen so skewed? Part of the setting, definitely a part of the setting. Is that a bit better? Okay, so I was going to do kind of a 10-minute intro, but because I've wasted a bit of time getting on, it's already 12 minutes past. I think we're going to bring Stephanie in. Stephanie, you ready? I hope I can remember how to do this. Add to stream. Stephanie, are you there?
I'm here.
Let me just turn your volume up. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you good.
Okay, I can kind of, I won't say barely hear you, but I'm hearing you on my phone, so it's not ideal. But anyway, it's good to have you on. It's definitely, you've got to kind of remember all the things with StreamYard. It's if you haven't done it for a while, it's kind of like what to do, right?
Yes. I'm trying to see if I can find a way to see chat without having a double delayed photo of us. There we go.
Yeah, no, that is the difficulty. The way I've got it, all of it's on my phone, which is a small little screen, and then chat's also there. And it's kind of, you prefer to see chat on YouTube or on your desktop, but that apparently delays StreamYard. StreamYard's a bit finicky that way. The other thing is there's apparently a 10-second delay. So there've been people, when we did this in the past, people complained. They said, Nick, you are extremely rude. The way you talk over your guests is incredibly horrible. Unsubscribe, blah, 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 blah. And other people were saying something similar to you. I think that I can't believe how you just speak over. Well, there is a 10-second delay, and unless you've done StreamYard, you don't know. Sometimes you're talking, someone's asked a question, and you wait and it's like, wow, did you not hear what I said? You carry on talking, and that leads to kind of interruption. So try not to judge. I am actually someone who does sometimes interrupt. I just think it's part of healthy talking. It's the way people do talk. I don't mind being interrupted. I certainly don't want to be rude, but people must just be a little bit open-minded, I guess.
Yeah, I got the same thing that people would say, "Oh, you keep interrupting Nick," and I was like, I think it's also that because we're from different countries too, so it's worse than when I've done it with someone who's also in the United States. So
I do find it absolutely incredible that you can talk across timelines on someone almost on the other side of the world, just like that. And I mean, you didn't have to buy an airplane ticket. You didn't have to sail in a ship. You can just say, "Oh, I want to have a conversation with someone." You can see them. They can see you. 100 people can also see you having the conversation. It's kind of like magic, right? And then you'll still have people criticizing you, saying, "I didn't like the way you said that," or whatever.
or if I'm looking like down, I'm actually looking at you because I'm talking to you, but my camera is not where I'm looking.
Yeah, no, I also have that same issue. So before we kind of get started, I want to just share some magical things that have happened to me in the last day, that just day or two, that just I just kind of want to, the people who are watching and listening, I just want to kind of open your mind to the artistic experience, if I can put it that way. It's basically just everyday things that you may or may not notice that just open your whole world to a kind of a new experience. So I wasn't like looking out for this. I didn't like say, okay, today I'm going to look out for a magical experience. It was just things that happened that were like, wow, that was pretty amazing. And then something else happened, and then something else happened. And I was like, I really need to mention this. So the first thing is I went mountain biking, and I was at the top of this hill, and there's kind of like a ostrich crossing. So there were like 4 or 5 ostriches kind of crossing the road. So it's obviously not in suburbia. It's in kind of a fairly wild area, but all the ostriches were sort of kind of in a line and sort of crossing the road, and I was sort of like, do you mind if I go? Do you want to go or should I go? And you kind of got to be careful with ostriches. They got strong legs. If they're not happy, it can be not good. You actually have the same thing with giraffes. You don't want to mess around. You go, I go. Let's stay out of each other's way. But it was just kind of weird how it wasn't like a couple of ostriches on the side of the road. It was like 1, 2 next to the road, and then 3, 4, 5, and it was like, okay, ostrich crossing. So that was the first thing. That was sort of like, wow, where in the world could you? Besides in Africa, where in the world could you have an experience like that?
Not in Connecticut. Not in
Yeah.
Connecticut. I imagine them crossing quickly. They run? Do they run?
They can run, but these ostriches are pretty relaxed, and they weren't running. They were just sort of plodding along. But I have actually, in that particular area, I have actually done a running race where a female ostrich was running with us, and it was weirdly sort of normal. It was like you, in a way, you'd think, okay, this ostrich is totally spooked and it's totally panicked or something, but it was this weirdly, at the same time, alien experience, but also like, okay, well, I guess this is happening. Almost like I kind of got the idea that the ostrich is quite tame, and it's in the Tour de France, you sometimes see the cyclists going past a field and then horses will run alongside. You must get a sense that the animal is going, hey, this could be fun. It's not like a fear thing, it's more of a fun thing. I could be wrong, but I mean, I didn't like stop and run the other way. We all sort of ran with the ostrich kind of thing.
Who was faster?
It was downhill. I don't actually remember the ostrich passing us. I remember us passing the ostrich. So it wasn't going at full speed, but it certainly is a weird thing even to remember. Anyway, that was the one thing. What happened, I think, today and yesterday. So this really blew my mind. 4 swallows were sort of flying almost in a line to my porch window. It's like quite a big window. And then I think they were looking to nest or to build a nest or something. I don't know if it's the offspring of the swallows that are there, but they were flying in a line like swallow, 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 not like one swallow, okay, 30 seconds, just like swallow, 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 swallow. And then they'd sort of, the one did something, the other one would hover behind it, and then they would sort of move by, and then they'd fly off again. And then they sort of probably made 3, 4, 5 circles like that. Like, it's quite something to see one swallow. Yeah. And so I don't know if they were like, hey guys, let's build a nest. Okay, you guys go that way. But it was just quite amazing to see that. And then it's the same sort of idea. I think Timmy's feeling a bit left out about talk about ostriches and swallows. Like, what about me? Wasn't I part of the magic? Anyways, I was actually walking with Timmy this morning, and after a pretty epic bike ride, that's also something to talk about. I won't talk about it now, but went for a walk with him, and there was this nook in a field that we were walking on, and there were like 20 butterflies, 15, 20 butterflies. Like if you think about where you see butterflies, you sort of think 1 or 2. Yeah, there were like 20, also kind of in this weird maelstrom. And they were the same butterflies in the last photo of Gabby Petito, the sort of, I think it's the monarch butterfly. It's sort of like an orange and black and white. But it was just so weird seeing so many, and they were sort of kind of doing a dance. Yeah, and they weren't migrating, they were sort of just, and I was like, while I was watching them, I was thinking, because I mean, they've like got insect brains, they were once upon a time a worm. So they're like, are they like going, like air traffic control? Okay, you go that way, I don't want to bump wings. You want to go for that flower? I'll take that one. And so they've got to coordinate their flight. And a long time ago, when I was at advertising school, we had a, what do you call it? We had a mission or a task to do. We had to reinvent the branding of an advertising school. And so I came up with a butterfly, and then the mantra was butterflies flying information. So this idea of you sometimes get butterflies, you get nervous. But if you can get those butterflies to fly information, you can actually inspire people. You get those butterflies to fly information. So now it's creativity. You know what I mean? It's sort of something that could be chaotic is now creative, if that makes sense. Sometimes you get butterflies. It might be good butterflies, like you see someone that's attractive, or you about to go traveling somewhere and you've got butterflies, but now the butterflies are flying information. Yeah, definitely. So anyway, so all I'm trying to do by talking about this is bring you to this place where you think about ordinary things, but they suddenly become kind of magical and meaningful. So you might say, okay, so you saw some butterflies. Well, there's butterflies in my backstory, where I'd used it as part of a advertising thing, and I got really high marks for that, and so in the same way, when you talk about Van Gogh, you might say Wheatfields. That doesn't sound very interesting. But when you start digging beneath the surface, it's incredibly interesting. The whole idea. Tell me, you're making me hot.
One of my favorite assignments when I was in college was in science. We had to keep a science journal, and we had to sit outside every day for a half an hour and write down literally everything we noticed. And you become super observant. And one of the most incredible things that I noted and I remember is watching the leaves grow and blossom on a tree, starting with the little nub and then the little, and because when I wasn't keeping a journal and just in everyday life, all of a sudden, oh my God, look how green the leaves are. But it's this whole process that I missed until I was told to slow down, take note, and notice. And that was one of the coolest experiences. And even now when I go outside, either to walk my mom's dog or with my boys, I'll be like, oh, look at the little buds. Spring is on its way, because it doesn't just happen in spring. And I also notice our hawk friends are back in their nest.
Oh, really?
Third year in a row. Yeah. So we'll have hopefully have some baby red-tailed hawks in the spring.
Are you a gardener?
Yes, we do. We have my husband and I, we have a pretty large garden in the back, and we grow all kinds of herbs and vegetables and fruits. So, we alternate. We have two, they're home built, big wooden gardens that are in our backyard. So like a quarter of our backyard, which is pretty good size, is garden. And then we end up giving, basil and cucumbers and zucchini and, to our friends and family.
Yeah, I think it's always good to, if you plant vegetables, you're actually getting something out of your garden. It's not just the flowers come out. You have a kind of a stake in your garden. I'm just trying to think where I saw in a movie something about, just like a comedy, where someone said something really serious, and then the person responded by talking about vegetables. I think it was the trailer to The Lost City, with Sandra Bullock and Brad Pitt. I don't know. I just saw it very recently. I can't remember exactly. Oh no, it wasn't that. It was Death on the Nile. That movie with the investigator, Pono, what's his name? Pono, Kenneth Branagh, where he plays that kind of investigator, and then someone's talking to him about something quite serious, and then he says, "Oh, I think someone's talking to him about, have you never thought of getting married and settling down?" And then he says, "You know what? I've got a house and I grow vegetables," and then he just starts talking about vegetables and how, I don't know, just how it's almost like, okay, but love, not gardening, not vegetables. So that's something that kind of stood out to me in that.
Tired of that question and excited about his passion for growing his garden.
Yeah. Have you seen that movie, Death on the Nile?
No.
Oh, okay. I actually fell asleep in it, but my sleep patterns are definitely all over the place. But that was just an element in it. Should we get going with our assignment?
Yeah.
Okay. Timmy, can I please put you down? Because you're really warm.
I kind of did what you do, because I didn't want to forget anything, and I didn't want to start mumbling or anything. So I kind of wrote, I wrote a script like you sent to us on Patreon. And so I have that. And then I thought maybe I could read a little bit, and then we could talk about it. I did it extremely in depth for chapter 7, the vast Wheatfields. And I just had nearly begun on chapter 8, but I can begin with that if you like.
So I think what we're going to do is we'll obviously alternate. There's just two of us. I'm gonna kick off with, I really made although I did quite a long script right now, which goes a lot beyond what Bailey did, what I want to do is I want to jump in and just highlight just 2 or 3 things quickly in, is it chapter 6? What chapter is it? Or is it chapter 11?
Oh.
Chapter 7, okay. So this is a chapter. You can see the painting there, there. And I'm just going to really, really quickly highlight a few things. Then you can kind of do the longer version of that. Okay. So yeah, so I think the first thing just to mention is, and I've mentioned it on Patreon, that this particular painting that he's got with that chapter, Vincent van Gogh actually painted that picture of Wheatfields 2 days before he shot or got shot. And that's quite significant. So any painting or letter that is like in the week or days or 1 or 2 days, that is very, very significant. What's really amazing with all of Van Gogh's paintings is wherever Van Gogh painted something, that is telling you where he was. So if he painted Dr. Gachet, well, he was with Dr. Gachet. It's not like, he's not the kind of artist who kind of goes, or he paints from a photo. Every scene he paints, he was there. And so the fact that he painted 70 paintings is telling you, well, on that day he was there, that day he was there. That is giving a very accurate record of his movements. So if you didn't know anything else, you could say, okay, let's take his paintings and follow where he's going. Where did he go most of the time? Did he paint more gardens or did he paint more wheat fields? Did he paint more houses? Was he more in an urban setting or is he more often in a country setting? And so on and so on and so on. That's just a different way you can analyze this. So let me just quickly just look at some of the comments here. Sharon says, love monarchs, so many in Canada. I think there are some huge migrations from Canada, or I don't know, I know in North America there's some massive monarch butterfly migrations. Nisi says, what a wonderful assignment. Robin Aiello, not quite sure what you mean by being there. Then Lynn Coleman says, yellow swallowtails are my favorite. One landed on me at the cemetery a week after our 13-year-old's funeral. Wow, that's quite an incredible. Just that whole statement is pretty incredible. You do sometimes wonder when wild animals do things like that. They approach you or they land on you.
Yeah.
It's like, what's going on? Do they know you're a human being? Did they mistake you for a scarecrow? What's actually going on? Is there something a lot deeper going on? Are they coming to you for food? Did they have a human being in their backstory? Did a human being raise them or love them at one point? I once had an experience like that where there was a seagull on the side of the road, and I live far from the coast, and my father stopped and caught it. It was a juvenile, and then it went on. It was like the story of the ugly duckling. This seagull went on to become this beautiful white seagull, and then many years later, we gave the seagull away to someone who had like a big aviary, and many years later, I was paddling on the river on our farm, and probably one of the most magical things that has ever happened to me, the seagull came out of the sky and landed on the river right next to me, and it was obviously the same seagull. But just and I mean, this is in the center of the country. It's not like a seagull at the coast. So quite an amazing thing. I'd like to think that the seagull, we called it Nelson, or was it Gulliver? Some of us called it Nelson, some of us called it Gulliver, but I'd like to think he recognized me, but who knows? But so anyway, what these 2 chapters are dealing with are the connections Van Gogh felt with nature and what that tells us about whether he was suicidal. So in other words, you can have a connection with nature where you feel like, well, nature's cruel, nature's vindictive, nature is scary, nature's intimidating, nature's dark, nature's got no, like take no prisoners, and all of those are actually true to an extent. When you lately, I've seen those big rain spiders in my garden. I've just seen the leftovers of them. So something's eating them. I don't know if it's wasps or birds or whatever, but it's sort of like, it's almost like we have great whites that are preyed on by bigger sharks, where orcas actually eat their livers. So they just eat the liver and then leave them. It's like you tend to think, wow, a great white's really scary, but there's something that is scary to a great white. So anyway, I'm just saying nature can be, you can see nature as this terrible, callous, cold, horrible, dark, hopeless system, where things are like animal-like and there's no compassion and it's horrible. Or you can see it.
Or for like Lynn, the swallow was a sign of comfort. It landed on her.
Yeah, and that's exactly what
we can't sense,
That's exactly what Van Gogh said in his own words. He said that he is trying to paint nature's healing, soothing, resurrecting, affirming qualities. And one of the ways you can do that is by painting, for example, wheat fields. Wheat fields are growing, they have cycles to them, the color changes. Like behind me, this photo I took was in May, I guess late May, but that's basically spring. Not early spring, but probably mid-spring, late spring in France. And so you can see those wheat leaves and stalks. The seeds are actually already out in some of those, especially on that side. The seeds are already sort of coming out, but it's very early in the season still, not close to harvest time. So let me so we're obviously talking about this book, Van Gogh's Finale. I'm just going to highlight 2 or 3 things from the book.
Nick, can I just ask, is everybody having a hard time hearing me?
Can you guys hear Stephanie?
I see Axie is having trouble hearing me, and I'll try to speak louder.
I can hear you okay.
Okay. I was just wondering if other people heard me okay. Okay.
Sharon Sharon says I can hear you. Sometimes if you can't hear or see, you just should refresh. That can often fix it. Okay, so chapter 7, vast wheat fields, and then Bailey quotes Van Gogh saying, "I'm wholly absorbed in the vast expanse of wheat fields against the hills, large as the sea." And that's something that comes across elsewhere, where he talks about in a letter to his brother from Auvers. And I don't really want to go out of the Auvers period, but I think this is worth mentioning, where he says to his brother, let me just go to it. This is a letter dated 26 September 1888, so basically 2 years before his death. But he's talking specifically here about nature and about getting lost in depicting it and kind of caught up in it. So it says here, at times Van Gogh was so enamored with nature that his sense of self seemed lost in the intensity of his work. And then this is the quote, dated September 26, 1888. It's a letter to Theo from Auvers. He says, "I have a terrible lucidity at moments these days when nature is so beautiful." So he's writing now in September, saying these days, obviously late summer, in France. These days, when nature is so beautiful, I'm not conscious of myself anymore, and the picture comes to me as in a dream. Now, when he says terrible lucidity, you might think what he's saying is it's horrible. You might think that he's saying it's not enjoyable. But he's talking about nature is so beautiful in these lucid moments. And it's so beautiful that he's transported, that he transcends himself. And he also talks about the painting comes to him as if in a dream. I can tell you, as an artist, as a writer, anybody who talks in that kind of language, saying, wow, I've got this terrible lucidity, what I'm seeing is so beautiful, I'm not even conscious of myself. And this thing that I'm trying to create happens like almost in a dream. What he's actually saying is, this is awesome. He's saying, I go out into nature and I have this incredible experience that transports me, and I'm so inspired. And what I'm seeing is so vivid and incredible. And it's like, wow, 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 wow. He's not saying, it is so horrible, I want to die. He's not saying that. He's saying, what I'm seeing is so beautiful that I feel good and I feel joy and whatever. And if you just look at something like a wheat field, and I did put a clip in the post I put on Patreon. So I do try and put pictures there just to reinforce what I'm talking about. I also put a clip from my own Instagram that I took from all, just of grass near a painting that Van Gogh painted. It's really of that drawbridge in all. I sort of also lay down in the grass and I just recorded the grass with the sun on it. And I was trying to, I don't like to say channel Van Gogh because I sound like some of the fruitcakes on YouTube, but just feel what he saw, just connect to the natural scenes that touched him. That's really what I wanted to do. And I also got that sense of this is so beautiful, just the light on this grass and as the grass moves, right? Because again, it's not like this incredible, wow, most amazing thing I've ever seen. It's grass moving in the wind. And in the movie Witness, there's scenes where it seems like this living thing, where sometimes you see the same thing with water. And I must say, even just researching this, I kind of felt my whole body kind of prickling with just that sense of magic and that sense of electricity that you see when you're in those situations. But there's a scene especially the opening scene of Witness, that 1985 movie, where they show the grass and actually looks like people coming out of the grass. It's almost like people came out of the field, like literally come out of the field. And in a way, our history as human beings is related to the change in nature, where grass became a big factor in. We didn't have grass forever. Wheat is a kind of grass, if I'm not mistaken. It's a kind of crop, but it's the same thing as grass in a way. And that is, in terms of nature, quite a modern development. I'm saying more than I want to say, but what I'm just trying to get at is the experience that he's talking about is where you're transcending yourself, which means you're not overcome by troubles and worries. You're in nature and you're feeling, wow, this is beautiful, and it gives you a sense of well-being, not like life sucks, right? And so the fact that Vincent van Gogh painted this, and the title of this artwork, which he painted 2 days before he got shot, is Wheatfields After the Rain. So, is he saying life sucks, or this is 2 days before he got shot, or is he saying this is look how beautiful this is? So the other thing to emphasize here, I'm sure you're going to touch on this as well, Stephanie, is that particular scene. Sorry, not that particular scene, it's another painting, but it's a wheat field he painted called, I don't know how to pronounce it, Les Visenos.
I looked it up. It's Les Vesnons.
Okay, that's awesome. Thank you. That's just behind Dr. Gachet's house. So, it's like, again, you've got to say, so where did Vincent van Gogh die? So you say, no, he died in a wheat field. Okay, well, could have been right behind Dr. Gachet's house. So even if it was in a wheat field, which I don't think it was, but if it was, could have been Dr. Gachet was like, I just spoke to my daughter, and she said you did this, and then but he's now run out of his house to Van Gogh in the wheat field. Where's Van Gogh? He's out in the wheat field. Okay, I'm going to go and speak to him now. I've had enough of this. So I'm just saying, you might think, oh, he was far away, but you could go just over the ridge line, and then you'd be in the wheat field. And I meant to actually do this. I might do it later today or tomorrow. I took quite a few photos of Wheatfields. I took photos where Wheatfields with crows was painted. And I want to show you guys just what it looks like, what those photos of the Wheatfields look like. Okay, so that's the other point to make. So first of all, when he's painting these Wheatfields, he's actually not conscious of himself. He's not like, life sucks and whatever. He's actually like, wow, this is so magical. Just think about a field under the sun in spring, in summer. It's a calm, restful, a few birds are tweeting, there's a farmer doing something somewhere. It's actually a affirmative experience. Also,
this moment in nature.
Yeah, the sun's shining in virtually every image, not like it's this gloomy, cloudy, muddy thing. Okay, so the other thing I wanted to emphasize is I've kind of spoken about this before, but on page 71, he talks about Van Gogh went on to tell Gogh rather poetically that the young wheat vibrates and makes one think of the soft sound of the ears swaying in the breeze. And so he's communicating that sensation of grass vibrating, or the wind or the breeze moving through these hundreds of thousands of little filaments, I guess, in the air. And the effect of that is it's like the world is a living creature, the land is alive, and you get that sense of vibration and energy from a lot of his art. And so this is what he's thinking about in the last 70 days of his life, being alive, right? Now going on to page 73, I'm going to stop there. I will catch on with a very big insight on page 74, but I want to hand over to you, Stephanie. On page 73, he talks about, this is Bailey. So this is what I've highlighted just to show you. So it's on this page with that image. And there is actually only painted wheat. So there's nothing else. There's just wheat. And you could argue that's a very dark image. That's like this tangle of vegetative structures, and I'm lost in the tangle of life and whatever. That is kind of different. That is titled Ears of Wheat. It was actually painted in June. So remember, Van Gogh died at the end of July. So, and the other thing to notice with these ears of wheat is it's kind of green. It's not yellow, right? So that is kind of a shade lighter than that you see over there. And this was taken in May. This was painted in June. So anyway, to quote what he says here, what Bailey Wright says, he says, much has been read into these late landscapes as a result of Van Gogh's comment that, and this is a quote, there are immense stretches of wheat fields under turbulent skies, and I made a point of trying to express sadness, extreme loneliness, right? And that particular statement that he made actually has a bearing on the previous background that I had, which I've actually got in my bedroom. So ironically enough, in my own home, the two biggest landscapes I have, and they're in my bedroom, are both of Wheatfields. So that's the kind of impact it had on me. I didn't say I want to put Wheatfields. I was like, these two paintings stand out to me the most. And so what Bailey is saying here is that Van Gogh talks about trying to express sadness and extreme loneliness. And I don't think he's trying to express that willy-nilly. I think he is experiencing that. I think a lot of artists feel sad because they're alone, or a lot of artists can feel lonely, which leads to sadness, kind of thing. And so that's the point he's trying to convey. And the important thing to look at here is he talks about immense stretches of Wheatfield. So the immense stretch is conveying scale. So the size of this Wheatfield is conveying scale. But the emotions are conveyed not really through the fields, but through the sky above them, through the clouds. The clouds are saying, I feel either troubled, you can have troubled skies, you're going to have happy skies, you're going to have turbulent skies. And so he uses those words, turbulent skies. And you can imagine that is how he's feeling. He has turbulent emotions. And turbulent emotions manifest in many ways. I feel lonely, I feel ecstatic, I feel frustrated, I feel attracted to this person, but blah, blah, blah. I feel my art's not getting anywhere. I feel confident that my art's progressing, all these different feelings. I'm happy with my work, but why am I not selling it? All those kind of things.
And turbulent can be feeling them all at once.
Yeah, so turbulent can be good and bad, but it tends to be negative. If you have turbulent feelings, I don't think it means you're feeling particularly good. But then this is the part that's really important to emphasize, is he mentions those things. He talks about sadness, extreme loneliness. Bailey writes, this outpouring of emotion in mid-July, he's kind of jumping a little bit ahead of our timeline, but he says, this outpouring of emotion in mid-July, bear in mind Van Gogh died in July. He says, suggests he was feeling increasingly abandoned, lacking support from family and friends. And I've written here, correct. He probably was feeling like that, but how much more was he not feeling like that when he was in the asylum? There were many, many times where he felt abandoned and in much worse place. So I'm sure he did feel those feelings, but he had to have felt it much, much worse in the asylum. Here, his brother had just come. The previous chapter is about his brother coming to visit him in Auvers, and his sister-in-law, and him playing with a baby, and that's not abandonment. That was like a wonderful day. Everybody said so. Everybody said that was such a great day. Joe Van Gogh even said, it was so funny watching him, or Paul Gachet Jr. said it was so funny watching him run around after the ducks and how much energy he had, and it was a pleasant experience. So he had those highlights in Auvers, which he didn't have at all at the asylum. If you actually think about it, it's you. You enter yourself into an asylum, and you're there for a year, and no one came to visit him. Theo didn't go and visit Theo didn't go and visit Vincent in the asylum. And if it was me, I'd be like, jeepers, I'm in a hospital. Don't you want to come say hello? And he didn't. So then he really had cause to feel abandoned. So anyway, on the last page,
Go ahead. I just had written that Auvers was his happy place.
For sure. So this is the part that's so important to emphasize. So if I stopped at page 73, where he says he was trying to express sadness, extreme loneliness, and I'll put a poll up on this particular episode saying, do you think he committed suicide? Yes or no? And you say, oh my goodness, on page 73 of this book, from this art expert, quoting Van Gogh's own words, he talks about feeling extreme sadness and extreme loneliness. There you have it. He committed suicide, right? And then you turn the page, and I'm going to...
I know exactly what you're going to say.
Yeah. So then you turn the page. Here I am turning the page. And at the top of the next page, and I've got it highlighted there, right? He says, yet as soon as Vincent had written the words extreme sadness, he immediately pulled back. In a complete about turn, in the very same paragraph, he went on to add that these canvases will tell you what I can't say in words, what I consider healthy and fortifying about the countryside. And so he's kind of acknowledging his own state, which is, yes, I feel sad, yes, I feel lonely, but being out here is good for me. Being out here is making me happy and healthy and all the rest, right? And that's the other side of the story. And I'm making the argument that that's the case, right? I'm making the argument that that's the case, but I'm using this art expert's words, quoting Van Gogh as well, to say, there you go. This particular art expert is saying, no. He was not in a happy place. He was blah, blah, blah. But in his own words, he acknowledges, wow, he does mention the sadness, and then he pulls back, right? So it shows you that Van Gogh seems to be winning the battle against his own demon, seems to be in a good place. And before I hand over to Stephanie, the thing I want to emphasize again that you're kind of got to ask yourself is, to what extent was Van Gogh like an old tire about to burst? To what extent was he worn out? To what extent was he weathered and beaten up and broken down, that he just wasn't going to last much longer, that he was at the end of his tether, end of his rope, and that if something happened, so he's so worn down by life, he's so sad and depressed and lonely, when the rubber meets the road, when something, and a crisis is about to happen in the story, when this crisis happens, that thread is so threadbare, it is just going to die. That's really the question. And what we're trying to show in all of these episodes is that happening? We've just showing in this episode that when he paints his Wheatfields, he feels like he doesn't actually feel his troubles, he transcends them. He loses a consciousness of himself, and he feels the energy around him. And in his own words, he says it's healthy and fortified. And it does feel like he was becoming healthier and fortified in the last few days, which is why he painted 70 paintings in 70 days, because he was healthy and fortified, right? And you could make an argument that if he sort of painted 60 paintings in 60 days, and in the last 10 days he was like, I just don't have it in me. I've got nothing. I'm done. But that doesn't happen. He keeps painting, right? So anyway, Stephanie, let's hand over to you.
I feel like you read my script because we didn't even collaborate on this, but we noted all the same things.
Yeah.
But that's a good thing. It means that we both saw the same things stood out to us. At first glance, when you last week or the week before, when you said, oh, why don't we do these two chapters? And you said vast wheat fields and bouquets. And I said, oh, okay. And then I looked at them and I was kind of like, oh man, like I really wanted the one on Dr. Gogh, but I was so surprised once I delved into this, how much I got out of it that tells us about Vincent. So it was really good to see something on the surface level and then challenge myself to really look into it and see what it can tell us about his mindset. So I have, from Vincent's point of view, Auvers seems to be his happy place. It's a good fit for Vincent socially. He has the innkeeper's family and visitors to the inn, Dr. Gogh and his family. It's within travel distance for from his brother Theo, his sister-in-law Jo, and his nephew baby Vincent, and offers vast and beautiful landscapes and architecture for him to paint, to provide him financial opportunities and a refreshing space for his mental and physical health. So, and that's from Vincent's point of view. Now, some of those people that I listed may not be in his best interest, but I think that Vincent was getting something positive from visiting the doctor's gardens and having conversations and being a part of a family dinners. So he was getting that socially, along with the opportunity to be immersed in the nature. Upon his arrival to Auvers, Vincent was entranced, this is what Bailey writes, by Wheatfields, capturing them in all seasons and varied weathers and in differing lights. His arrival in late May was the perfect time to experience them, as the wheat was growing tall and would soon turn a golden hue. To me, his paintings depicted in Chapter 7 show a balanced representation of the landscapes and skies, some dark and stormy, some bright and sunny, and others more whimsical. So it wasn't, I feel like Bailey was trying to give the impression that nearly all the paintings were, I think he used the word foreboding, and I didn't get that sense at all. I thought that they were a well-balanced representation of the season and the weather that he experienced while he was there. The wheat fields symbolize golden opportunities, literally and figuratively. The harvest represented a time of plenty, and Vincent compared himself as an artist painting his canvases to farmers plowing their fields. And so I was like, well, what exactly does that mean? I know that they work hard, and so I just looked up really quick and Wikipedia came up, and it said that to plow means to turn over, to mix, to bring fresh nutrients to the surface while burying the weeds and then letting them to dry. So it really is a good analogy that Vincent has of him being like the laborer, the farmer, and performing his, creating his craft. His first Auvers wheat field painted was the landscape of Les Vaisons, which was just beyond Dr. Gaucher's house. Les Vaisons shows rippling brush strokes, a sliver of sky enlivened by fluffy clouds, a bright red roof, fields in varied shades of green, scattered with yellow flowers, and small farms dotted along a fertile valley. So this is, oh, you got it too?
Oh, okay. Yeah. That one.
Yours is brighter. Yours looks better. Yours looks better.
Yeah.
Your lighting is better. And
so it's quite a happy picture. If you look at the color, it's vibrant, and it sort of looks like it almost very luminous colors, I must say.
For a first painting of the landscape of the wheat fields in Auvers, that was just stunning. It's like a breath of fresh air. To me, it looks like a breath of fresh air. And words that I highlighted that were used to describe his paintings was rippling, enlivened, fluffy, bright, and fertile. And I noted that it may also prove fertile for Vincent, who had hopes of a livelihood earned by selling his paintings. Bailey writes that he probably painted this a week or two after his arrival, and Les Vaisons revels in his unalloyed, pure joy at discovering the landscape.
Yeah, so those are two words to just underline. Again, it's Bailey himself saying he looks at that and he sees pure joy from the artist. And once again, pure joy, happy, celebrating, whatever, it's all positive emotion. So when are we getting to depressed, sad, blah, blah, blah? And you might say, well, we got to that extreme loneliness. But Van Gogh himself says, but this is a healthy scenario, right? The other thing, just to, I'm not going to, I want you to carry on with your script, but the other thing to bear in mind is think about contextually what's going on here. Van Gogh has been sick. Van Gogh has been in an asylum. Van Gogh's kind of trying to get back into the rhythm of things. He's trying to get back to work, and he's doing it. And it's kind of a scenario where he leaves the asylum after being there a year, but he leaves there, he must have arrived there around about winter time. And he leaves there at the end of winter, the beginning of spring. And there's something kind of symbolic in that. He leaves this place of sickness and sadness and failure. Bear in mind, it's easy to forget this. When he leaves Auvers, when he leaves the asylum and he goes to Auvers, he arrives there without an ear. So he's carrying the pain and the horrors, I guess, of the recent past. He's going into this new place without an ear, right? And even if he starts forgetting about it, people are going to be looking at him. Every time they look at him and they're like this, he must be thinking, yeah, it was like this, but he's trying to do what the land is trying to do at springtime, which is grow, which is germinate, which is come alive. If you think about a land that is in winter, it can't grow, it dies, right? And so in spring, it's trying to come back to life from this perspective of death and coldness and abandonment and all that kind of stuff. And the exact same thing's happening with Van Gogh. He's trying to come alive. He sees around him all these animals. There's a newborn baby as well with his brother. And so the metaphor that he's painting is also, I think, a very strong metaphor for Vincent himself, which is resurrection, these cycles of life, but trying to come back into life, right? And I think we are all touched by this, whether we're artists or not. If you're in winter where you are, I don't know whether you're feeling, well, the winter's been here for a long time now. It's getting a bit much. I need warmth on my skin. You know what I mean? You're feeling deadened and you're feeling limited. I can tell you, I went out cycling this morning and I felt two different things. The one is I felt the cold. It's been incredibly hot here, but there's been a bit of a bite in the mornings where the morning you can feel like, well, summer's not, that, because normally it would be warm anyway in the morning. So the days are still very hot, but there's like a bit of a bite in the morning and the sun's coming up later. So you already kind of get the sense of, wow, I need to get my exercising in because the summer's coming to an end. I must enjoy the last bits of summer. What's the other side to that? Yeah, I went on to have this epic cycle. I'll tell you guys about it another time, but this morning, a really, really epic ride. But that is coming from the energy of what is around you. The birds are doing all this kind of thing, and you are responding to that. And that's exactly what he was responding to as well. Anyway, so I think you're going to talk about this picture next, hey? On that side. It's a bit of a darker picture.
I don't know if is that
just called Wheatfield.
Okay, let me see if I have that one next. Yes, I do have that one next. To relate to what you were saying, it was just a couple of days ago, we had it was almost 65 degrees here. And I tell you, I got so much done. I went outside for a walk. My kids and they played outside after school. It just felt like a breath of fresh air having that. And then the next day it was 30 degrees colder and I felt like hibernating. So it definitely is something about that spring, that new life, that just that little bit of warmth, a little bit more light at the end of the day, it does affect a person. At least it does for me
Definitely.
too. So for Wheatfield, and you can hold it up if you want, because I do think your lighting is better. Vincent describes the painting as a green field of wheat which extends up to a white villa surrounded by a white wall with a single tree. So that's how Vincent describes it. Bailey says it captures the movement of the green shoots with ripening ears bending under their weight in a breeze. In the distance, a substantial building and an outhouse are squashed beneath a tiny layer of sky, lending a claustrophobic feel to the composition. So the words that I highlighted here were movement, ripening, bending. Those were from Bailey, and also substantial, squashed, and claustrophobic. What are your thoughts
Yeah,
on that?
I must say there is a tiny amount of sky in that particular picture. If you compare it to the other one, there's also not much in the other one, but really not much. Now, I must say, on the one hand, I agree with Bailey about the claustrophobia, but on the other hand, if you think about that picture with the train going across the horizon, there's also a tiny amount of sky there, and I wouldn't describe that as claustrophobic at all. That's to me, a very happy, pretty, charming scene. And there's also a tiny amount of sky there. So I don't know whether he's saying, I feel oppressed. I think it's just what he's trying to
Most
convey there.
of the paintings of the landscapes in the wheat fields, I think it's like the fields extend so far that you're seeing a sliver of sky. I don't think it's a cluster. I think it's like a silver lining. I don't necessarily think of it as something dark and depressing. There are darker skies and stormy skies, but I think a lot of his paintings that are at least shown in this chapter that have sky, it's not a big amount, a large amount of open
Yeah. So
sky.
I don't want to necessarily disagree with him that it's not oppressive, but I just want to say it's not necessarily oppressive. You just got to be careful in a case like that being too certain. I think you've got to kind of keep an open mind. Sometimes Van Gogh is just painting what he's painting. There's not this big ominous overtone to it. And then sometimes, as you saw, that he will say, I was trying to convey extreme sadness in the scale of the landscape, but I think there's a tendency because if you're studying Van Gogh and you know the end result, that he dies, that because you've got that in your mind, you now go to all of his art and you want to look for that. You've got to also try and just allow the art to speak for itself. You've got to try and you're aware of the end result, but you've also got to say, well, let's look at all of this art as a continuum and let's compare all the Wheatfields he did. And this is an important point that I think I didn't make in the script that I wrote. If you put all of or I didn't make it as clearly as I am now, put all of the Wheatfields he painted when he was in Saint-Remy, and you juxtapose them to all the Wheatfields he painted in Auvers, and you say, okay, which Wheatfields are darker? Which ones are whatever? I would say the Auvers Wheatfields are brighter, friendlier, happier, more colorful, just kind of more of a joyful celebration. The Wheatfields at Saint-Remy are sort of pretty turbulent and pretty I don't know if it's because of the mountainside there, but they just seem although they're impressive, they kind of seem emotional, I think is just a word to put it. They seem kind of roiling, kind of like waves.
Yeah. And I think he was at a different point in his journey then. then when he arrived to Auvers, I just think it was like invigorating countryside, refreshing, a new lease on life, you know, being free. And I think that you don't see that in the Wheatfields prior of the ones that I've seen that you put in that link, I think.
If you had to use water as an analogy for the Wheatfields, I would say the Wheatfields in Auvers is like a lake or a pond. It's sort of like fairly flat and it's fairly tranquil. Whereas the Wheatfields at Saint-Remy are kind of like waves breaking on a shore. You know, the one is definitely more turbulent than the other. Even the shapes of the trees and the rocks and so on, and the sky especially in his depictions while he was at Saint-Remy are kind of like waves, kind of going like that, circular, whereas the patterns and squares of the Wheatfields in the Auvers period are ordered and it's more tranquil. I just want to read, sorry to interrupt, I just want to read a few comments here. I can't see them all, but True Jedi Forever wrote, a little bit of not seeing the forest for the trees to me, feeling when I look at it, like I can't see past what is in front of me. Nisi says, thrown in a pond. Axie says, Vincent has a special relationship with sky. Very, very true. He brings the sky down to earth. He concentrates on the earth, the living wheat, before it's ground up to feed us. And if you look at this picture behind me, there is something so emblematic about this idea of the grass reaching up to the sky. You know, it's like hands reaching up to the heavens, asking for something, and then it rains and the sun shines on it. There's a feedback between the earth and the heaven, right? And we as human beings looking at that are, in a weird way, interpreters of that, where you see that feedback and you say, I see the feedback and I feel good. I see the feedback and I feel alive. I see that feedback and I feel taken care of. I see that feedback and I feel soothed and healed and whatever. Or I see that and I'm alone, nevertheless. I see that and I'm unsettled, nevertheless, etc. Let's just look at, Nisi says predisposed notions on his art. Robin talks about it being verdant, being fertile.
Okay, the next painting that they share is Green Wheatfields. That was from June 1890. And Bailey writes, it has a decorative quality. The field painted with surging brushwork in a range of greens, blues, and yellows spreads over half the composition. The lush colors of the fast-growing crop, patterned with flowers, suggest the June date. A track at the right side of the field breaks up the composition, imparting depth to the picture under a sunny but turbulent sky. And the words that I noted for this artwork were decorative, surging, lush colors, patterned, depth, sunny, and turbulent. And I love the sky in that one. I think it looks like it's whirling.
Yeah, I must say, I love that picture. That's definitely a candidate for my home as well. I think it's just so interesting. What a kind of unusual sky. The sky, if you look quickly, you almost imagine the sky is gray, but actually it's kind of almost like a very light green, but it's basically a blue sky with very puffy, steamy clouds and then some blue within the clouds. Although it may look gray when you look at it there, the reality is it's not gray, but it certainly is quite turbulent. But I mean, overall it looks like looks summery, doesn't it?
Yeah. The next painting is Ears of Wheat on page 73. And as you noted, Nick, Van Gogh zooms in on the crop, creating a picture seething with rhythmical brushstrokes. The patterned effect is almost like a tapestry. And I highlighted here that he included a rough sketch of it in a letter to Gogh. He added a description of it. Studies of wheat, nothing but ears, blue-green stems, on leaves like ribbons, green and pink by reflection, yellowing ears lightly bordered with pale pink due to the dusty flowering. So here we can see that Vincent is continuing to sketch and describe his art in his letters. And I just noted that he's done that. He wrote a lot of letters and a lot of sketches of the artwork that he did, and he described it. So it does make me wonder about that second portrait of Dr. Gogh and the etching of Dr. Gogh, because that was not mentioned or noted in a letter that I've noticed or come across in my research. And I think that Vincent would have done that. And I was wondering, actually, Vincent also wrote Gogh that the young wheat vibrates and makes us think of the soft sound of the ears swaying in the breeze. That's what you had mentioned to us. And Van Gogh is extremely sensory driven, in tune with visuals, sounds, touch, and movement, appreciating his surroundings and feeling very much alive. And then I have this is a question, and I have it squiggled for you. Vincent seems to be continuing to reach out and keep in touch with Gogh with the letters he's writing him from Auvers. What is Vincent's relationship with Gogh at this point in time? After their time together in the Yellow House and what happened to Van Gogh's ears, why continue to contact Gogh? For Theo's benefit, to sell both their paintings, ...
I think that's a fantastic question. I think part of the answer is he's quite lonely. And so although his relationship with Gogh isn't like, there were obviously significant setbacks, there were significant arguments, it's kind of like his only friend. You know, it's the only guy who actually came and stayed with him for a little while. And it's got to get although I think Van Gogh had a good relationship with Theo, you have a different relationship with a friend than with a family member. You know, in a way, a friend sees you in a different way than a family member. A family member may see you in a way that is true, but nevertheless limiting. A friend, you know, especially if you're an artist, a friend may see you in a way where they see your potential, even if it's not necessarily that justified, right? So I think part of it is that he just doesn't have very many friends, and Gogh, as much as they had some horrible disagreements, Gogh did tolerate him, and Gogh did understand him, I think, probably better than most. Didn't mean that Gogh thought he was awesome, but he was familiar with him, and so they could kind of speak in the same kind of language.
Did Gogh respond?
I'm not sure. What's fascinating with the Van Gogh story is what Gogh says about Vincent when after his death. It's not very nice. So you kind of get the sense that Gogh is kind of he's actually done with Van Gogh, but he sort of puts up with him because he's got a relationship with his brother, that kind of thing that's going on. So it is a fantastic question. Why is Van Gogh reaching out to this almost enemy? I mean, someone who didn't treat him very well. Whether you agree with me or not, that I mean, I believe Gogh actually sliced off his ear with one of his swords. If you say no, I don't think he did that. Well, Gogh nevertheless abandoned Vincent at arguably the most vulnerable time of his entire life. It just almost bled to death. His bed was soaked in blood, and when the police arrived there, they thought he was dead because he wasn't moving, and he'd lost a fantastic amount of blood. And Gogh then just leaves town. You'd think, even if you didn't like somebody, that you would at least, because of the distress, Van Gogh did communicate, please don't leave me, please don't go. I'm going to be so alone. And that is conveyed fairly well in At Eternity's Gate. To me, At Eternity's Gate's a terrible movie, but there's some wonderful moments. So the opening scene where he's painting his shoes, that's excellent, but also where he conveys the horrible loneliness of Van Gogh, where Van Gogh begs him not to leave him, begs him not to go. That I think is quite true. Now, I've got to say, in Lust for Life, I thought the way that everything pretty much was conveyed, although I must say the way the argument with Gogh, I thought that was done very, very well. But pretty much the rest is terrible, especially him actually painting Wheatfield with crows, and the crows actually flying against him and then him killing himself. It's like, I can't paint this painting because the birds are flying over me. Okay, I'm so frustrated. Douche, absolutely silly. But to me, the dumbest part of Lust for Life, which is, I think, the thing that most people actually believe, just think about this literally. The dumbest part of Lust for Life is the most basic assumption, which I think most people have got wrong, which is you see the actor Kirk Douglas trying to convey loneliness. And so what he does, he'll be like, looks in the mirror, grits his teeth, goes like this, and he's like so lonely. And, now that to me is not loneliness. Loneliness is if you want to express loneliness of an artist, will show him drinking. You know what I mean? That's basically it. It's show an artist that's lonely will be taking substances, will be acting in a sort of a raucous way, and he'll be disturbing the peace. He won't just be gritting his teeth and looking at the sky, kind of thing. There's another scene where Kirk Douglas is in the inn at Auvers. This to me is the most ridiculous scene in the whole thing. He walks into the inn, and it's like a restaurant at the bottom, and around him, I think it's Bastille Day or something, and they're sort of celebrating Bastille Day. So all of these people are doing their thing, and he sits down and is like clenching a glass or the table, and he does the clenching thing of his teeth. I'm feeling so lonely, kind of thing. I just thought it's just a terribly simplistic depiction. To me, a much better way, again, of presenting that, besides showing him drinking, would be either showing him painting like the scene that's really beautiful, but a very lonely scene. That would be one way. But another way would be a scenario where his brother and his wife, his brother's wife and child are doing something, and he's the outsider looking on, and he suddenly realizes, I don't have a family. I'm alone. I'm not. You guys have this intimate thing going on, and I don't. You know what I mean? There you can see loneliness. You know what I mean? What do you think?
I think that Vincent was experience loneliness. I think that I haven't seen that movie, but the portrayal that you're showing, I mean, I shouldn't have been laughing, but the way that you were doing it did seem or look silly to be expressing it that way. I would think more of an artist or a person withdrawing and trying to numb themselves to not feel. And I think that's what you were saying with substances or even using art maybe to express some kind of angry, powerful piece, not just look in the mirror and
Yeah. I had this other thought. What was it? Another way that loneliness can manifest, I sort of touched on it when I said you can be quite raucous, you can be intoxicated, and you becoming a bit of a nuisance. But another way is you make, particularly, you make unwanted advances to the opposite sex, right? So, yeah, yes, Van Gogh, he is lonely, but one of the particular ways that he's lonely is he's single. You know, if you said Van Gogh's lonely, how can we take that away? So the one way you could say is he needs a friend. So you say, okay, well, it didn't work out with Gogh, right? Did Gogh sort out his loneliness? Well, they actually fought a lot or whatever. But just in a general way, you could say somebody's lonely. How can you sort that out? So you could say, well, if their family come to visit them, that'll help. Okay, well, that did happen. What's another way? Well, if you introduce them to a friend and blah blah blah. Well, he apparently had a friend in Dr. Gachet, right? Despite perhaps certain problems. But there's the third dimension, which is I think you can have family by you, you can have friends, but you can also be single and be like, I'm missing that connection, that deep connection with another person. I'm missing that. Hey?
Companionship.
Yeah.
A companion.
The whole continuum of it. Someone who knows you, someone who loves you, someone who has that that intimate carnal experience with you and you with them, and so that's one way.
Satisfy him mentally and physically.
Yeah, and so that's one way. I'm feeling really, really lonely, and so there's someone that I just feel really attracted to, and am lonely, and she's friendly, and dot 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 kind of thing. And so you can, I really think that's a dimension to his loneliness that a lot of people just don't see or have forgotten. He's a 37-year-old man. He's been in an asylum for a year. He's misbehaved really badly in the months before that with Gogh. They were both going, doing their thing, partying up a storm. And Gogh was a big party animal, make no mistake. It's not that Gogh is the good guy here. They're both pretty naughty individuals, to put it mildly. Sharon says he needs a wife. I mean, you can't really put that any more succinctly than that. The thing is, I don't know how many women would have put up with it. So you might say, oh, shame, Van Gogh's such a nice guy, so sweet, his art's so beautiful. But if you actually put a woman with him, I don't know how long things would last, because he's just not just a moody guy. He likes things a very particular way. You can get that in his letters. He's sensitive, but he's also kind of oversensitive. He's particular, but he's also a bit over particular. He wants everything his way as well. I think he's too emotional. He can't control his emotions, I think, in a way. And I think his art almost conveys that intensity of emotion. So if you were if you wanted to matchmake Van Gogh, you would say he needs emotionally strong woman, but not a reactive woman, and not a what's the word? Yeah, kind of an introvert. So someone who's got a lot of a high threshold for stuff and can put up with a lot. I guess someone like Joe, Theo's wife. So someone who's got a lot of inner resources. I mean, think about what Joe did with their art, with his art and with his letters. She had a lot of resources. So someone who's can deal with someone's temperament, which means someone who's not volatile, someone who, you know what I mean. And one wonders, could that have been Marguerite Gachet? You kind of get the idea that Marguerite was quite a quiet, inner place young lady.
It might have been a good match.
Based on the kind of guy Dr. Gachet was. Bear in mind, Dr. Gachet's daughter is going to know how to treat this weirdo that is Dr. Gachet. So isn't Dr. Gachet's daughter going to know how to treat this weirdo that is Vincent van Gogh? And also, if they're so similar, if she loves her father, isn't she going to be like, wow, this guy's actually reminds me of my dad and is quite interesting, besides the missing ear.
and the age difference.
Yeah, Nisi says a non-confrontational wife. Not necessarily non-confrontational, but confrontational in a soft way, or in a way that doesn't seem confrontational. Yeah. Terry Dean says probably not relatable to many people. So, I mean, who better than Marguerite Gachet, who understands not just her dad, but other artists as well, artists plural, understands this artistic thing. And bear in mind, the Gachets seem to be interested in art. You know, they collected art and they were interested in that whole thing. If anything, I think Vincent van Gogh had to be an interesting visitor. He definitely had to be an interesting visitor.
Yeah, Marguerite was familiar with quirky.
Yeah. Nisi says substances plus depression equals big trouble. So that's the other side, and I've touched on this before. If Van Gogh was drinking and taking substances, he wouldn't have been able to put in the last 70 days, he wouldn't have been able to produce those 70 artworks in the last 70 days. So I think part of him cleaning up his act was not drinking. I don't know whether I can think of an instance where he did. I know there's a movie that depicts him going to Paris in the middle of his Auvers thing and going to a brothel or something. And I guess it's possible that he did, but he nevertheless painted 70 paintings in 70 days. So that was by far the theme of what was going on. Like he was working. He wasn't partying. It wasn't like the opposite would be Gogh, who is partying, and then he has this weird epiphany when he's drunk, and then he paints this weird scene of a yellow Christ figure or yellow Messiah, which he has actually painted. Also very interesting in terms of your question, why would Van Gogh write to Gogh, whatever? Gogh actually painted Vincent as a Christ figure with this very orange hair. So you kind of get the impression from Gogh that Gogh understood or saw Van Gogh as seeing himself as a martyr, seeing himself as a Christ-like personality, and that is very valuable insight into when we talk about how he died, why he died, and why he said what he said. That aspect is so important.
Vincent painted him that way?
No, Gogh painted Vincent that way. If you can kind of Google it, I don't know how to do it right now, but
it might be in the following chapters.
No, it's not in the book. But there is a painting Gogh did of Vincent where where he's got this bright orange hair, and it's something about Christ in the garden of I guess Gethsemane, and people are saying that's actually Van Gogh. So it's quite an interesting
I'll look that up.
view.
Yeah.
Okay, so Nisi says, my father is a composer, writer, musician, painter, all-around artist, very kind man, but our household was intense, I'm sure. I'm from an artistic family, so my brother's an artist, but there's a lot of art in my family, and it isn't conducive to a calm. I mean, if you are sitting at our dinner table, if all of us are present and you are sitting there, try getting a word in. Try getting a word in. Anyway, True Jedi Forever says, I just don't think he wanted a permanent relationship with anything except his art. It's a very good point that did he want a permanent relationship? I think he did, but I think he couldn't for a couple of reasons. First of all, he didn't have any money. Second of all, people didn't really understand his art. People thought this is bizarre, this is rubbish. And I think in a weird way, he resigned himself to a relationship with his art, if that makes sense. Like, he probably would have liked his cake and eat it, which is be an artist and be married, right? But so ideally, he would have liked to have found someone who accepted him for who he was. Wouldn't most of us, kind of thing. Nisi says his ego must have been large. I think so. I think you can't pursue life as an artist, especially when you're not really successful, without having a huge amount of self-belief, a huge amount of self-drive. You can call it arrogance or you can call it confidence, but you can also call it kind of an authentic identity where you've seen something and you want to develop it. Nisi says, my dinner table at 88, my dad and I still fight for words. Yeah, that is often the case. Artists are very expressive. And so if you're an artist, your companion, if you're an expressive artist, not all artists, I guess, are verbose, but if you're an expressive artist, you probably want a partner who is relatively reserved, I guess, Yeah. Stephanie, do you want to continue?
Yeah. So, in a letter to his brother Theo, Vincent described and included small sketches of two of his plateau landscapes, a plain near Auvers and Wheatfields after the rain. And I noted that Vincent continues to write and send sketches and describe his art. So now he sent it to Gogh. He's sending them to Theo and Joe. So he's still sending sketches of and descriptions of his work. Bailey writes that plain near Auvers shows endless fields beneath curling clouds, painted with thick impasto. The vivacious foreground, composed of short strokes at varying angles, gives the impression of a windy day with changeable weather. And words I described this painting: endless fields, curling clouds, thick impasto. Is it pasto? Impasto?
Isn't it antipasto?
No. Impasto. That's like
impasto.
a food.
I'm thinking about the pasta. Sorry about that. Sorry, a bit of a brain.
That's okay. And vivacious.
I think that is just a very thick paint that he splashes on. Yeah.
And then Wheatfields After the Rain was the second one that he described to his brother Theo. And some of the words Bailey used to describe this was a patchwork of fields, green and rich golden brown, with a chevron effect, exaggeratedly tall trees, and patches of dark blue. And then I kind of like exclamation mark, exclamation mark, exclamation mark wrote that he painted this 4 days, or I don't know if it's 4 or 2, but 4 days prior to his death. And then I said he shot himself in the Wheatfields. What? To Vincent, they symbolized opportunity, growth, and life. So that's just, of all the places for him to take his life, is a place where a place he found refreshing and that symbolized life to him. So that just seems strange to me.
So to me, one of the biggest problems with the Van Gogh suicide story, and again, you must approach this from the true crime, what do you call it? You must use the true crime toolbox when you talk about this. I think people have the tendency to go, okay, Van Gogh is something totally separate. And it might take a little bit of time to get used to it. But if you think about just the bottom line with true crime, some of the bottom line questions you ask is who, where, when, what, why, and so if you think about where, such a basic question. So where did Van Gogh commit suicide? Nobody knows.
Yeah.
When I went to Auvers, I asked people that I thought would know or would even have an idea. So when I went to Dr. Gachet's house and I spoke to people there, do people have any idea where? No, we don't know. Nobody knows. Oh, okay. When I went to the Revue Inn and the tour guides there, where did Van Gogh commit suicide? No, we don't really know. It's a mystery. Oh, okay. Now, from a true crime perspective, there are two ways of looking at it. The one is you'd say, so in a proper suicide, aka Brian Laundrie, right? You'd say, where did Brian Laundrie commit suicide? Answer is very simple. Where his body was found and where the gun was found, that's where he committed suicide, right? It's quite simple. Even the Brian Laundrie case is like, you'd say, theoretically, it's quite complicated because it's like this vast wilderness, and it took a really long time to find his remains and the animals and so on. But ultimately, it's very, very simple. Did he commit suicide? Yes. Where did he commit suicide? There. Quite simple, very open and shut. Now with Van Gogh, it's like, well, where did he commit suicide? Question mark. And that's a very serious problem, because if you don't know where he committed suicide, then you don't know that he committed suicide. I mean, you can't say, wait, let me put it like this. If he committed suicide in a wheat field, you can say, okay, so he was alone, it could only have been him. But if he committed suicide at someone's house, now it becomes an issue of, but are you sure he shot himself? If there's someone next to him, couldn't someone have shot him? Does that make sense? You know what I mean? So if there's someone in that picture, it suddenly becomes, well, it could have been somebody else, right? So where is really, really important. One of the early stories was that, and I think this actually comes from Paul Gachet Jr. Whenever you have a little hole in the Van Gogh story, you'll notice Paul Gachet Jr. kind of puts his hand up and he says, I know. And then he gives you the answer, and it's like, So Paul Gachet seems to say that he knows the answer to where this happened. How do you know, Paul? Like, were you there? Maybe he was, but if you weren't there, how do you know where Van Gogh was if nobody else knows? Like, how can you be the one that knows this? So as far as I know, Paul Gachet believes that Van Gogh took his life behind that chateau. Like, there's the chateau there. You know about that? So just to put it simply, I'm not going to pull up the map of Auvers, but because the screen's a bit small, but if you take these three pens and you say, this is kind of in reverse. Okay, so you say, this pen here is Van Gogh's home. In the middle is the chateau, and this is Dr. Gachet's home. So the chateau is between the two, but it's not like it's in the opposite direction. It's if you at Vincent's home, or if you're at Dr. Gachet's home. So let me put it like this: if you were at Dr. Gachet's home and you wanted to go to Vincent, you'd go past the chateau. If you were at Vincent's home, you wanted, so the chateau's there. In other words, they're kind of like, it's not like neighboring properties, but they're basically next to one another. So what Paul Gachet is saying is, in my view, to my knowledge, Vincent killed himself right next to my dad's house, but behind the chateau. Oh, okay. So not that far away. Oh, okay, thanks. That's really interesting. Now, one of the things I wanted to check, test, analyze when I went to Auvers was this very question of where did this happen? And the thing that seems to be consistent with a lot of the stories you hear is Van Gogh is bleeding and he's walking past all these people in town. So whether you're watching at Eternity's Gate or all these different depictions, you have this image of Van Gogh is bleeding and he's walking through town, and people are kind of looking at him and like, what's going on here? And then he stumbles into the Rabu Inn. And if you take him being shot at Dr. Gachet, then that's exactly what would happen. You would have to walk past other houses and whatever. If he's shot in the field, then there's almost no urban fabric to go through. You would just go through the back of the town, and it's basically 50 to 100 meters, and he wouldn't really walk past anybody. So why on earth, if you were shot in the rural areas, you're walking past everyone in town?
Right.
Well, I'm just saying, if you're shot in a wheat field, the quickest way home is over the ridge and home, which is through a tiny little fraction of the town. But if he's shot where Dr. Gachet lives, it means you've got to walk all along the road to get home. And the version that we get is that he walked all along the road to get home. So it just starts to feel like he wasn't on a field, because then he could have just cut through to get home. Right?
Yeah.
True Jedi Forever says that's interesting, especially since they didn't find his art supplies. The other thing is they didn't find his gun.
Weapon. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even with Brian Laundrie, a lot of people were not accepting suicide because we didn't know that they had found the gun. And
I was one of them. I was saying, if they don't find the gun, I'm sorry, I don't think it's suicide. And then people were saying, well, the water could have washed it away. Not really. And then it turned out that they did find the gun. It was like, yeah, well, there we go. And I must say, I felt like the Brian Laundrie case was, bear in mind, we didn't know the outcome while it was happening. I thought this is a very interesting analogy to Van Gogh, and we'll see what it turns out to be. And then it did turn out to be easy, demonstrable that he did commit suicide. The only little question around it was he used his left hand, but he was right-handed.
So you had shared how Van Gogh talked about expressing sadness and extreme loneliness in his paintings, and then how in the same paragraph he said, these canvases will tell you in words what I consider healthy and fortifying about the countryside. And Bailey wrote, this outpouring of emotion mid-July suggests that Van Gogh was feeling increasingly abandoned, lacking support from family and friends. And I responded, I think self-expression can be a healthy thing, an outlet for emotions. It's possible that his recent visits with his family and friends may have left him wanting, longing, and looking forward to a family of his own.
So there are two dimensions to Van Gogh's being so expressive. He's an unusually expressive artist. He's not like just he's an artist. He's unusually expressive. Not only his art, but he's writing these letters every day, literally every day. And they're very expressive letters. There are sketches in the letters. And so you kind of got to ask, and it's the same point I made with Brian Laundrie. I still said, expect there to be a suicide note, and there was. And I also said, it's very likely there's a manifesto, like that he's written something in his notebook, and they don't want to actually repeat it because of certain reasons. But why do you not have anything like that with Van Gogh? You don't have him saying, sorry, hey, Theo, sorry, I've just, I can't do it anymore, I'm done, bye. And there's no lead up even to that. You don't like have Van Gogh saying, you know what, the last few days I'm just not feeling it anymore, and I think I'm going to just take a break. Just none of that. It's just painting, ordering supplies right up until the moment he dies. So so the thing that people want you to believe, including Martin Bailey, is that everything is kind of going fine and he's happy and he's productive and he's motivated until the moment he kills himself. And it's the same psychology some people have with Brian Laundrie, is that he didn't commit suicide because of Gabby Petito. That's totally irrelevant. Brian was like, blah, 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 blah. Okay, I guess the police are going to catch me, takes his own life. And what you're doing when you say that is you stripping a human being, and I don't want to give Brian too much credit, I don't want to humanize him too much, but you're stripping a human being of basic feeling, like that Brian possibly did genuinely love, or in his way, love in a real intense, I'm not saying it's appropriate, but loved in a way that felt real and intense to him. So if you take that away, then you say, oh, well, he committed suicide because he didn't want to go to jail. I think the fact of what he did to someone he really loved also that definitely does play a role, that he didn't want to get caught. But the dynamic that connected him to Gabby and disconnected him from her was definitely a big factor, traumatizing him, upsetting him, all those things. And we don't like to think of a criminal as a human being, as someone with feelings, hopes, wishes, and so on. But in the same way that you don't want to think of Brian Laundrie, at one time, Gabby wanted to marry him. Gabby wanted to be on this van life trip with him. Even during the Moab incident, Gabby wanted nothing to happen to him and for the story to continue. Right? Gabby loved him. Gabby liked him. And so, in the same way, you've got to think about Vincent van Gogh in the same way, that he also had feelings of love and loss and so on. The question is, was he a worn tire or not? And does the evidence show that? If he was a worn tire, was he a very worn tire? Was the tire about to burst when it burst? Was it like looking like, is it just about to burst, or did it look like he was not very worn out? I mean, and in the previous episode we dealt with the doctor giving him a clean bill of health, and then the family coming over to visit. It seems like he wasn't drinking and he was productive, so none of that bears itself out.
Vincent also wrote another letter, this time to his mother and his sister Will, and he describes the color of his latest landscapes as delicate yellow, delicate blue, white, pink, and violet tones. And it does seem that Vincent writes about everything, writes about a lot. So you would think that if he was going to take his life, that he would have some kind of letter, or and he cared about his family, some kind of goodbye or something to give them peace. I feel like he cared about, he worried and he cared about Theo and his mom, and I feel like he would have, something would have been left behind.
I see it very differently, this idea of if you compare Van Gogh to a drug addict, and I think he was like a drinker, he's kind of got to convince his family that he's on the mend. He's kind of got to convince them that he's changed his ways, because he's kind of lost their respect and lost their favor in a way, right? Based on the scandal of him losing his ear and being literally thrown out of all, right? So now he's kind of got to rebuild his reputation, but not only to people around him, but kind of to his family. And bear in mind, he's also an artist, so he needs to win back respect. He needs to win back reputation. And the irony is, in that when he was alive, he was, I think, in a way, rightly not respected, because he was a bit of a oddball is a kind way of describing him. He was a bit of a lech, and he was a bit of a horrible drunk, and someone who created disturbances and lots of problems wherever he went. So I think what was going on was he was trying to rehabilitate his image, and part of that was demonstrating, he's trying to live a clean life, right? And so even if he did feel lonely, even if he did feel sad, he's trying to, it's almost like fake it till you make it, right? But you could say, well, so if he did feel bad under those, if you accept that, he would simply just not admit it, just like, I'm not going to admit it. The thing is, if he was failing at that, if he was like trying to fake it till he made it, and then felt, wow, I just can't do it, it's just too much, then he would have communicated that. He would have said, this is too hard. And there is actually a letter where he does say, I was actually feeling quite hopeless. And that's your best evidence of this train that is on, that's gathering momentum of it, sort of getting a bit derailed. Before I get back to you, sorry, I just want to read some things from Axie. Axie says, it's messy. She says, I don't think he was a worn tire. I think the environs were patching him up nicely. Great turn of phrase there. Delicate, tender. Nisi says, wouldn't his ego dictate a letter? That's a good point. His ego would make him say, look, this is the situation, kind of thing. Nisi says, no suicide note seems like it would lessen his life, if that makes sense. Yeah, that's a good point as well. It's a good point. That's a really good point, because if he was struggling to be alive, and it was quite a heroic struggle. He was painting a lot. He had a lot of hardship. And so if he had decided that's the end, you can imagine him saying, you know what, I've tried really hard to live. And so I'm going to write this note, and that's going to mean something. I don't think he battled for so long just to wordlessly take his own life. The last words I think he said to Theo was, the sadness is going to last forever, which kind of gives you the sense that what you're showing up there.
Huh?
What were you showing up there?
What?
Were you showing your notes?
Oh, sorry. I think my ADHD was just fanning them. Sorry.
Oh, okay. This has actually gone on much longer than I thought it would. But if you think about this chapter, I only highlighted like 3 or 4 sentences. I thought this is going to be half an hour at best. But anyway. But I do think that's yeah.
Oh, I was going to say, the last time where he wasn't feeling well and he wasn't thinking clearly, he sought help for himself. He put himself in the asylum.
Yeah.
That's a huge thing. And to then go through all that to come out into this beautiful countryside and then give up just seems like he would fight for, he would do something, like he would have the wherewithal to be like, I'm not okay, I need help again.
And if he had a problem, why wouldn't he go to his doctor, Dr. Gachet? He's having a problem. Okay, we'll go to your doctor.
Yeah. So the last painting that was described in this chapter is Wheatfields with Reaper. And Bailey writes, but not all scenes are filled with foreboding. So this one he didn't feel was messy and disturbing. It shows the crop being harvested and stacked. It includes a figure of a reaper with a sickle, nearing completion of his labor, a reminder of the cycle of life. In the distance, there's a village and its church. And I wrote, I disagree with Bailey that this is one of the few scenes not filled with foreboding. That is actually one of the last words I'd use to describe Van Gogh's landscapes. Through the seasons and the storms of life, Vincent shared the beauty of nature and the power of healing, resilience, and growth found in the countryside. Van Gogh himself is not withdrawing or withering. In fact, I'd argue he's blossoming. As he wrote his mother and sister Will, it is important to see the flowers growing. And that quote brings us to chapter 8. So that's...
Is that it? Is that the end? Okay. I just want to say goodbye to Robbie. Robbie says, I need to sleep now. I'll catch up. Thanks for being here, Robbie. I don't know, Stephanie, are you okay for another 10, 15 minutes?
Sure.
Can you just read your last sentence again?
Van Gogh himself is not withdrawing or withering. In fact, I'd argue he's blossoming. As he wrote his mother and sister Will, it is important to see the flowers growing. And that quote brings us to the beginning of chapter 8. Okay. That's one of the first lines in the following chapter.
Yeah. That's really brilliantly said, because that's, to me, exactly what's happening. It's not like a flower at the end of summer that's wilting. It's literally, he is blossoming. I mean, it's hard to think of a better term to describe his output in Auvers than that. It's vivid, it's bright, it's like a flower. And I mean, he really produced some stunning portraits in Auvers. They're not like they don't kind of necessarily get as much credit as a lot of others like Starry Night and so on, but to me, most of his best work is in the Auvers period. I personally don't like the portrait of Dr. Gachet. I don't think that's like, wow, that's the best. But I mean, it is, if you want to argue when did he do his best work, well, his most expensive art came from the Auvers period, that portrait. But all I'm trying to say is he definitely did blossom. He was blossoming just even if you don't, I mean, the quality of his art also I thought was really good. But besides all that, just the fact that he was painting as much as he was doing is like blossoming. It's like, if you think about the point of the point of a garden, the point of a field of plants or whatever, is to produce seed, to produce something. And that's exactly what he was doing. He was producing all these paintings. And I challenge you to find another artist who can produce 70, just any guy, just try and find someone on Craigslist or anywhere. Find another artist who can paint oil paintings 70 days. You'd be very, very hard pressed to find someone.
Axie wrote, he's ripening, he's bearing fruit. And that is exactly what he was doing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's Bearing.
Yep.
So I don't think we're actually going to talk about the next chapter for a couple of reasons. It's not really relevant. It's the chapter's titled Bouquets, right? And let me just highlight just a few things here. Bailey writes, it is important to see the flowers growing, and there he's quoting Vincent van Gogh, something I think you mentioned. And that is what he's seeing. He's seeing that and he's feeling it. The next line, he reveled in painting floral still lives. The hamlets and fields were ablaze with color. All of this is conveying life and liveliness. Next page, vigorous picture, full of life. These are just quoting from Bailey. Vincent's furious pace of work meant that by mid-June he had run out of canvas. But then he would order more, and then I haven't done any more. I haven't highlighted anything besides that. The only other thing that I did highlight was that I personally think that this picture is fake. This one over here. Sorry, that one over there. I personally think that's fake.
That's the one they consider the most vibrant.
Yeah.
Huh.
I can't tell you. Yeah.
As I say, it uses the same pot as the one on page 80. So I wonder who might have painted that fake one.
Yeah. I can't tell you why I think it's fake. I just look at it and I'm like,
yeah,
it doesn't have any of those energy lines. The way he paints the flowers is too delicate, I guess. I don't see his name anywhere on this. Not that that's necessarily anything, but to compare that particular bouquet to sunflowers, to me, it's just totally different. I'm just saying, and I could be wrong, intuitively, that to me is a fake. I've seen other Van Gogh flower arrangement portraits or whatever, still lives that are much more kind of elaborate than that, which to me are much more definitely fake. I mean, it's like that is not his style at all. I'm just saying intuitively to me that's fake, and so I don't even really want to talk about it. I don't really even want to. It's like, and there are a couple of other portrait pictures from or the Auvers period that I also think are fake. I don't really want to go into that into too much detail, but let's see if I can find one.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So Vincent, this chapter was showing or telling about the still life, the floral still lifes that he painted, and it says, or Bailey wrote, floral paintings had long been important to Van Gogh. Coming from the Netherlands, he had been brought up appreciating the strong tradition of a genre that dates back to the 17th century golden age. And I wanted, I was wondering if you could relate to that through, was it your great-great-grandfather who painted, it wasn't still lifes, it was landscapes, right?
He also painted, he was mostly a landscape painter, but he also painted still lives, and he also painted portraits. So,
okay, so
basically the same portfolio.
Oh. So, and that was a big thing in the Netherlands, was the still lifes.
Yeah.
That was part of Van Gogh's, I know I'm saying it wrong, background.
I'm not an art expert to that extent, but what I will say is an artist in the tradition I understand. So you might say, well, if you're a modern artist or a Jackson Pollock, you would go a different route. I don't know if that's necessarily true, but if I take my brother, for example, he became a full-time artist. There are various ways that you what do you call it? You develop your craft. So there are different aspects to testing and developing your ability to render your environment, right?
Like stepping stones of
perfecting.
perfecting.
So some of the harder things to do, for example, is a portrait. So actually capturing the likeness of a person's face, you really need to pay attention to details like the subtleties of one's eyes, the shape of one's eyes, the distance between your sort of the top of your head and your eye line, the distance from the bottom of your nose to your lips, the size of your lips, the shapes of your lips, the shape of your face. Drawing a face is probably one of the hardest assignments for an artist, because it's got such micro nuance to it, right? And then I would say step up from portraits is still lives, where you're now drawing roses in a vase and you're trying to capture the subtleties of color and also shape, but it's not quite as subtle as in the face, right? And then up a level from that, or maybe down a level, but just a different level. Landscapes, I think, are easier, but if you don't understand perspective and scale, it can be the hardest of all. I mean, if you think about you standing on a hill and you just see a landscape in front of you in the sky, where do you put the horizon in your picture? You know what I mean? It can be quite a difficult decision. What are you actually trying to convey? Are you trying to show the sky or the land? Are you trying to what emotion are you trying to convey? So anyway, artists, the way I understand the process is you learn, you will draw all sorts of things. You'll draw the hand. You'll draw just like a simple shape like a cup. Can you draw a circle freehand that resembles a circle? They say, the biggest test of an artist is, can you draw a straight line? Another thing is just basically you shine a light on an object and then you show the light on the object in the shadow. And, another example is drawing a glass with water in it. Can you show the distortions in it so that it looks like it's a glass of water? So all of those are ways that an artist tests his ability to appreciate what he can see, but also to render it accurately, right?
Yeah. Just a few things that I noted, and then the next chapter is ironically called Portraits, because you were talking about the different stepping stones or crafts of art, works of art. And I think that Vincent van Gogh's portraits are my least favorite. I find his portraits my least favorite. That being said, because we're not on that chapter, for Bouquet, this is one of the first still lifes that he painted when he got to Auvers, and it happened to be at Dr. Gaucher's, and that's part of the orange table underneath.
Oh wow, yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, that's a great point.
And there's like a vase here that you can barely see. And those items were taken from Dr. Gachet's house. And so Vincent was super excited not only to have the gardens and the easel, but he also had a wealth of vessels. So he was using those. And just as when he first got to Auvers, the Wheatfields were, the time of plenty. Well, when he got to Auvers, also in late May, the what are they called? Chestnut branches were blossoming. So that fine time. So he arrives there, and it's just this truly magical place between the Wheatfields and the flowers. So that's just another thing.
So I actually didn't really go into that detail. Did Vincent van Gogh write about that in a letter to Theo, mentioning that he used Dr. Gachet's this and that and the next thing? Was that in a letter?
Let me look. I know it's in the chapter, but I will Oh, yeah. Well, they have a quote at the top, and it says, Gachet's house is full like an antique dealer's. There will always be what I need there for arranging flowers or supplies.
Awesome, yeah. So there, once again, to me, is confirmation of if Dr. Gachet said, yeah.
And this is a vessel, and this one you can find in, I marked, well, I don't, they show it later in the book, in the museum that it's at now, this vessel that he used to paint with a bird on it. And that's why I find it very interesting that if you think that this is fake, this one is fake, why is it in the same vessel that he used from Dr. Gachet?
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure.
That's where it's from. Yeah. I mean, unless someone could have just copied it. It didn't happen, but it's just a little bizarre. It's interesting.
Yeah. So remember we said earlier, why wouldn't Vincent van Gogh say that Dr. Gachet asked him to do a portrait especially for him, when he's even writing about using all these little things at Dr. Gachet's house? That's the kind of detail he puts in. He's saying, oh, you know what, I can use all these little things there. And the momentous achievement of the doctor commissioning a second portrait is a massive compliment. Oh, no, I'm not going to talk about that. I'm not going to say, I'm not going to put the books in there because I want to have the focus absolutely on him. And he asked me to do this, and I'm going to make the table more red, and I'm going to make this change and that change because he's in a different mood or whatever, blah, blah, blah. He just doesn't mention it at all. And I don't think you've got to be a true crime rocket scientist to say that doesn't make any sense. Given what you know, and you've got to know Vincent van Gogh by now, having gone through all these letters, to say he would definitely have mentioned that because he's trying to, what is he trying to do? He's trying to make a name for himself, and this is absolutely integral to that. So why wouldn't he do that? So that brings us to something I wanted to mention. I kind of didn't want to mention, I kind of wanted to mention it at the beginning of this, but I thought it might put pressure on you. But I think it's better just to mention it now that it's done. The question I want to ask is, do you have to be an art expert to show expertise in art, and in this case specifically Van Gogh? Do you have to be an art expert? Do you have to have studied Van Gogh at art school? It's almost like saying, did you have to go and study journalism to become a journalist? Is that the only way? Do you have to study painting to become a painter? But specifically in terms of the Van Gogh story, do you have to be an art expert to have expertise in terms of a particular artist, right? And it's a kind of a question I want to ask you guys, Sharon, Julie, welcome here. Axie, Lynn Coleman, what do you think? Do you think you've got to, it's like, shut up. Let's hear what Martin Bailey has to say. He's the font of knowledge and the only font of knowledge on this. Or can you develop an expertise just by paying attention? And where we come up with this approach is true crime, where you say, is a case like, let's say, the Barry Morphew case, is it only a prosecutor that can find insights and information and evidence? Is it only the prosecutor that can do that? Is it only a cop or a law enforcement person that can contribute to a case? In the Gabby Petito case, is it only the FBI that must search for Gabby, or can a TikToker or someone who's on YouTube, can they, by just simple observations, can they contribute meaningfully to our archive of knowledge? And the answer is anybody paying enough attention can lend expertise and knowledge. Obviously, some people can pay attention and totally misread what they're paying attention to, but in a very general sense, in lieu of how much time you spend on a particular case, any person just spending a crap load of time studying a case is going to become an expert. In other words, expertise is a matter of time and attention and concentration. To some extent, intelligence, to some extent, your ability to put things together, to some extent, insight, to some extent, the speed at which you can make connections. But it's basically, let's just see what Sharon says. Sharon says, Stephanie proved this by her clay vase observation. Yeah, very good point. Actually says, nope, no, you have to have eyes and consciousness and relationship to the world. Not quite sure what you mean by that. Nisi says paying attention. Nisi also says personal experience helps. So before I got into true crime, I also had that sense of who am I? Like, what can I do? When I wrote about the John Benet Ramsey case, it was like I came to it 20 years after the fact in 2016. I thought, I'm not qualified to do this. And that's, like, I think, quite a good place to start. You've got to be humble. You've got to feel like this is a daunting thing. But one thing that I think you can appreciate with Stephanie is Stephanie doesn't have like, and I didn't counsel Stephanie and we didn't have a debate about this. I just said, you know, volunteer what you think. And just the fact that Stephanie's interested, Stephanie's read my book, The Murder of Vincent van Gogh, Stephanie's got this book. So she's been paying attention, and you don't have to be a genius or an art expert or need any kind of training to look at a picture and say, well, that's what I see. And what you do need is just some knowledge of the backstory, and then to say, does this make sense? And anybody can do that. Anybody can say, I've got all of this information, and where does that take me? Does it take me in this direction or that direction? And bear in mind, in true crime, any scenario where there's a mystery, there's a piece of the puzzle that's missing. And so you take all the other pieces, and this requires time, attention, concentration, knowledge, getting all of those things, putting them in place, and then you have all the pieces of the puzzle. And where you don't have a piece, you say, I think it's reasonable to say that where that missing piece is, the lines and the colors and everything that's going on around that missing piece add to that, right? And then that fills in the missing piece. And anybody can say, yeah, that makes sense. I think what you say is missing is what's missing. That does make sense. It's not like that one piece that's missing is actually like a nuclear explosion and it bears nothing to do with the rest of the picture. Stephanie, do you need to go?
Oh, I just muted myself and asked my husband to bring me plug-in headphones because these are dying. And I don't know if it's going to disconnect me from StreamYard.
I just saw you suddenly not there. I was like,
Yeah, that's what I did. I was like, can you get me plugged? I didn't want to disturb you.
okay. So, I mean, how do you feel? Do you feel like you're getting a sense of familiarity and kind of confidence where you go, yeah, that doesn't, where you're starting to see things and feel it.
Yeah. Well, I feel like I've had practice with all the cases that we've deep dived, and I don't really see this as very different. I think this is the perfect example of it. And where I have questions, I ask them. But that's why I said at the beginning, after you shared what you noted, I said you basically just read my script, but I didn't show it to you because we were on the same page without collaborating first.
Yeah.
So that was kind of like,
I mean, that was
really, I was like, I did it.
The funny thing with this particular chapter, I kind of wasn't going to write anything. I just thought there's not too much to do. And then at the last moment, just before we went live, I thought, I think I do want to talk a little bit about just Wheatfields, not so much from his book, but from the archive that we have, and it really is interesting. We haven't really spoken about him painting reapers and using the scythe, and that symbolizing death. If you really want to symbolize death, he would have done that.
Yeah.
PW says great minds think alike. Well, PW is here as well. I just want to say this before I forget. I know Van Gogh is quite a hard sell. I also know Van Gogh is a hard sell in the true crime box. And throughout most of this live stream, we've had like mostly about 50 people watching. And when I did Barry Morphew, there were about maybe 150 people watching. So a third of Barry Morphew, given the relative obscurity of what you're talking about, to me is a thumbs up. To me is a job done. So I feel like this is actually a success. You know what I mean? I feel like let's just see what you guys say in chat. Did you enjoy Stephanie's analysis? Did you enjoy this format? It's a little bit different because one's got to coordinate. Lynn Coleman says, Sharon, I purchased this right after the last episode. I think I will buy the paper copy as well so I can have it in hand. By the way, Bailey's book's just gotten its 12th review. It's gotten 2 reviews, I think, since the last episode. I was really hoping that I'd get a 24th review, so sort of 12, 24. As I say, his book's only been out a couple of months. Mine's been out, I think, 3-4 years or something. But yeah, if you are reading my book, please review it so that we can read the review and talk about it. True Jedi Forever says, thank you for doing this. Super interesting. Actually says, Stephanie did a wonderful job. Also think so. I just love your enthusiasm. I love the fact that I never said, Stephanie, please buy this book. And it's an expensive book as well. So I really appreciate that from Stephanie. And Stephanie also read and reviewed Lullaby, and that's something I really want to get to. And I was just thinking we should maybe do this, and then, in other words, this Van Gogh series, which is essentially a really extended book review, and then go from that into TCRS book club. Seems like a natural transition, Yeah. Easy. Thanks so much. Sharon says, so interesting, Stephanie. Thank you, Nisi. Thank you both for a fabulous evening. I'm so thankful I stumbled across TCRS a month or so ago. I appreciate it so much. Well, that's really a nice, there's some people that have been here for years, and so it's nice when there's a newbie that's like, wow, positive impression. That's really good.
Speaking of which, congratulations on 86,000. I was watching that 85.9 for a while, and I was like, go.
It stayed on 85.9 for an incredibly long time. There's something going on where I got a lot of support and new subscribers from Alec Baldwin. And then suddenly it just changed where it was like, I've heard enough from Alec Baldwin. Every time I put a video up, -2 subscribers, -3. It was so weird. It was almost like people had decided, I've had enough. Yeah, so kind of a bit odd.
I really think the Baldwin showcased your ability to do what you do in real time on something that no one else had done, into the deep thoughtfulness that you have done and timeliness. And it shows that you're just very versatile. And,
yeah, thanks for that.
Or Baldwin to Everest to Van Gogh. It's really amazing, and that's why I admire you.
Yeah, I also thought but I think everyone was doing this. I thought the Gabby Petito case was one of the few true crime cases where you had a real-time critical thing going on, where it was like, where is Gabby and Brian? But Brian was still alive. And then where's Brian? And, people were like, it was like, so let's hear it. What do you think has happened? And that's very difficult. Some people kind of went totally overboard, and they were like, he's left the country, or he's on the Appalachian Trail, or that's him in Canada, And I mean, I still said he's actually he's not moving anywhere. He's in a house somewhere. But I obviously assumed he was alive. That seems like nobody, or very few people, assumed what had happened, which is that he'd taken his own life, But I must say, when I started writing true crime, I used the same formula as magazine articles, which is you get a brief and you've got to turn it around in like a week. It's got to come up very, very quickly. And I just noticed there was a thirst for news with a shorter and shorter turnaround happening more and more. And now it's almost like when something happens in true crime, they want the analysis right then. The case hasn't been heard, there's very little evidence, but people want to be talking about it right then. And that's kind of what YouTube has done, and the 24-hour news cycle is, we don't wait anymore till the court case is heard. We don't wait till we have all the evidence. Like with the Chris Watts case, you presented with the sermon on the porch. Right then and there, okay, what is the case? Is he guilty or not? Is he responsible or not? What has happened? It's not like a wait and see kind of approach. It's kind of, let's do our analysis now. Is he being truthful? What is actually going on? And more it's becoming like, okay, let's show what we know from this case into that case. And I must say, taking the tools from writing books to YouTube, the only thing that's, I think, a bit of a thing you've got to be careful of is being too shallow and superficial in your analysis, because you can make certain assumptions that seem right and dead on, but they're actually wrong. You know what I mean? You can assume certain things that make sense, but then it turns out it doesn't make sense. So, but the thing to address with Van Gogh is, this is a story that happened 130 years ago, right? 132 years ago. And you could say, no, but there's no information. The case is cold, there's nothing. And the reality is, there's so much information. There are hundreds of artworks, hundreds of letters, dozens of books, and there's just as much information as in high-profile crimes here, right? And so this idea that you have to be an art expert, one thing that I've discovered is the level of detail, the level of analysis, the level of investigation, the level of knowledge that you bring to any question or any sort of scenario from true crime tends to exceed the knowledge that just ordinary investigators, I'm talking about science writers or whatever, art experts or whatever, the level of the detail of the whole picture is far more complete and what's the word, comprehensive than the level of, I don't want to say expertise, but the level of research that they bring to the table. That they think that they're asking all the questions and answering all of them, but they don't know about all the tests that you have in true crime, the psychology, the identity, the context, the all the evidence and what that points to, whether it's pre-meditation, post-meditation, but the run up to an incident, all the patterns leading up to the incident and the aftermath to it, and so on and so on and so on. The family dynamics, how all of these things play into it. You get a lot of practice in terms of that with true crime that these art historians simply don't have. And so they talk about the art. They forget about the psychology. They know a little bit about the psychology, but they don't know a lot. They think they know Van Gogh, but I don't know if they know him as well as they need to. And then you have these simplistic and absurd things. I don't really want to talk about it too much here, but at the beginning of his book, he talks about holding this gun and having this kind of incredible experience, like, wow, this is such an amazing experience. I'm holding the gun that shot Van Gogh, and it's like,
that probably shot.
Yeah.
That's what he says.
Like,
I'm holding the gun that probably shot. There you go.
Yeah, and I'm like, probably not. Probably like 99% not, but you know. So there's a good example of the standard in terms of evidence from a non-true crime person, and the standard we would apply and say, if this is a police investigation and this is a court case and they said, is this the gun? They would say, well, there's a huge amount of doubt to that. There's a maybe 5% chance that it could be, but 95%, if it went to a jury, the jury would say, you can't prove that beyond a reasonable doubt.
Right.
Quite a good comparison is to say, is the gun found by Brian Laundrie, if it went to court, could you prove that it was a suicide? And you would, because there was only one gun. I think they could probably prove it was his father's gun. They could link the ballistics to I don't know, I think they found the bullet, but I think that they could link the ballistics to the actual gun. They knew how many bullets were there. There were still bullets remaining in the gun. So it would be very clear what was the situation there. With the gun found with Vincent van Gogh, because you can't even say where the crime scene is, you don't even know where it happened. How on earth can you say, oh, I found this gun over here, it's a gun that killed Van Gogh?
Yeah, and the bullet wasn't even in Van Gogh.
Yeah, I mean, in the At Eternity's Gate depiction, they actually they depict the person who killed Van Gogh throwing the gun into the river. So shouldn't you dredge the river was, and if you find a gun there, isn't that the gun that killed Van Gogh? You know what I mean? I'm just saying, if you apply true crime standards, it's absolutely absurd to say, hey, wow, I found this gun here 60 years later. I think this is the gun that killed Van Gogh. Okay, right. Did they not find any other gun? Like, you know, did they not? You know? But to me, a very interesting true crime.
And who presents the gun?
Right?
Who presents the gun? Wasn't it Paul Gachet Jr.?
No, I think it was a farmer found it, and the farmer gave it to the innkeeper. Or not the original innkeeper, not the revuse, but somebody else. I'm going to wrap up now, but something else just to whet your appetite for the next episodes. Remember, we're kind of going we're trying to build up to, we're going to come eventually into July and the last days of Van Gogh's life. And as we deal with the last letters and last paintings, we are going to get, so thus far, I think you'll agree that it's quite a clear picture that he's not suicidal. But as we get closer to July, it's not that picture's not going to be crystal clear. There's definitely going to be a bit of a a few speed bumps where you're going to go, sure, that changes things, or does it change things enough? And again, comes back to the question, is this tire really, really worn out, or a little bit worn out? What do you think? And that's why you need all of these episodes to assess, is this tire in good shape or is it not in good shape? So yeah, just the last thing to mention, second last thing to mention, thinking about true crime, thinking about forensics, thinking about ballistics, the fact that Van Gogh was shot in his abdomen means, now bear in mind with Brian Laundrie, as far as I know, the bullet went right through. It went inside his left temple and exited the other side, right? In terms of Van Gogh, the bullet never came out of his body, right? So he shot himself, or he was shot in the abdomen, and so the bullet is still in his abdomen. So you could theoretically say, and this is something pretty amazing about this book, Van Gogh's Finale, because he addresses this. But a question I had is, if we're really serious about solving this Van Gogh case, can't we do an X-ray of the coffin and see if where the bullet is, and take the bullet and examine it and see what we find out from that? Also, can we try and get a better sense of the trajectory, like try and get a animation where you can say that is exactly the point of entry, that's the angle, what hand would he have used, blah, blah, blah. I don't really think that's absolutely necessary, because that has been to some extent established. In fact, it's even touched on at Loving Vincent. That's animated quite well, where they show the guy kind of going on the floor. Have you seen that?
Which one?
In Loving Vincent, where that Dr. Masri or someone talks about.
No, I haven't seen that. I'm waiting for the watch party.
Oh, really? Have you not seen
No, I'm kidding. I have to watch it.
Oh, okay, but have you not seen Loving Vincent?
No, I haven't.
You have to watch that. You're gonna be.
I will. I will. I'm like
You're so lucky, because that is a wonderful story that you haven't seen, that's waiting for you to, and you're going to be tickled by it. It's really, I must say, I love the I think they're somewhat speculative, but I love the depictions of Marguerite. I think that's just for the imagination. Also, the depictions of Adeline Revue just brings to life this whole story. You realize it's not just somebody who's painted, it's someone, because it's these actresses acting the role. You realize, wow, this was a person, and this was their perspective, and this is what they thought, and this is what she thought of Van Gogh. Bear in mind, Adeline Revue was interviewed and spoken to lots of times, and her father related the story over and over and over again. Like, the sad part that a lot of people don't realize is, because of this perception, because of this story that he'd committed suicide, that place just closed down. The Revue Inn was like scandalized, and even though they treated him with so much respect, they had a funeral in the Revue Inn because the church wouldn't allow it. There was this scandal around the whole town of this, and so the Revue Inn went out of business. It's a little bit like, I suppose it's not quite the same, but it's a bit like being associated with Chris Watts and losing your job and losing your name. It's just like they happen to have a guest who something happened to, and so they lost their entire business. It's a sort of a tragic aftermath in a way. And so again, you can say the culture matters, to talk about how people would feel about something like suicide in 1890s France. So, PW says you will love it, referring to Loving Vincent. And I mean, the title says it all. You are going to be loving Vincent.
Just in case I couldn't find old school headphones. So if these go out, I just want to say thank you so much for having me. And
Yeah,
thank
no,
you
it's been
very
great.
kindly to the members and those who are watching, and the very thoughtful comments that you added.
Yeah. Thanks a lot for your work on this. I mean, you did it of your own accord. Thank you so much for the time you spent researching this, highlighting this. I mean, when I saw your notes, I was like, wow, you gone to a lot of trouble here. And yeah, I mean, I think overall this has been a really nice episode. So, are you keen to do another one?
Sure. I just feel like if that's anybody else wants to, I don't know if anyone else has the book, but it's really fascinating, and you get to pick Nick's brain and study a really cool case. But I'm
Yeah, I
open to
really
doing.
loved your question. Why would he be writing to Paul Gogh? You know, what's that all about? That's a really, that shows you've got great insight into this. So I really appreciated that. So I'm going to leave it to you. I don't think we should do the next chapter, but I think choose one after that. I don't want to. I don't want to talk about the Gogh chapter just because I want to get to. So let's just have a look here. I'm not going to do Gogh's Tropical Dream because I want to sort of concentrate on Van Gogh and his thing. I just want to see. So the
You
next.
can let me know whichever one you would like me to. I just considered it like a challenge to try to see what I could find.
So how about Day Trip to Paris? That's chapter 11.
Sure. I've already read that one, and I've got notes.
Okay, well, I think that is a very interesting one as well, because that's an inversion of them visiting him. It's where he goes to visit them, and teaser for that is it's not a. It's sort of there's a little bit of unhappiness in that visit. There's a little bit of unpleasantness there, and this I think takes place in July, and that's kind of taking us into the end game. So that's definitely going to be an interesting chapter. It'll also be good to get your feeling for it as a woman in terms of you kind of having this brother-in-law coming around, and you know, is he being a problem kind of thing? You know, is he going to kind of be an issue in the way that he thinks he is an issue?
Sure. Are you thinking of continuing the series on Sundays, or you'll let us know?
Yeah, I think next Sunday.
Okay, so next Sunday you'll be discussing portraits. Okay, well, I'll see you in the chat.
I'm actually thinking of doing another live around about this time on Barry Morphy, just finishing up on the affidavit. I didn't really get as far as I wanted.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm thinking of doing that tomorrow. I kind of want to get through a lot of the affidavit before the trial starts, and it's like 100 and something pages.
Yeah.
So I feel like I may need to do that twice a week for a while.
That makes sense.
That's kind of the next thing.
I said that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then the last thing, I just want to thank you for that link you sent me on Alec Baldwin and the Vermont, where that fits in with everything. That's going to be my next video. That's really, from a legal perspective, that's quite fascinating. Just one thought on that. It seems unfair. I think it's legally sound, but it seems unfair that you can have a suit against you, and then so you get the suit. Okay, great. And then you move, and then it doesn't apply. So it just seems like that shouldn't be right. You know?
Yeah, it's suspicious too.
Yeah.
I think it's preparing for something.
Yeah, no, for sure. But I think the exception to all of that is the wrongful death suit. I think that I don't think that's applicable somehow. And I think the fact that they they lodged it in New Mexico is going to counter the move to Vermont. Some I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I'm not sure about that, but it certainly is legal minds against legal minds. So we'll see what happens there. The other thing that I think is quite interesting is Baldwin might win the legal battle. So it might be like, sorry, you can't sue me. But then what do you think is going to happen in the court of public opinion? If that happens?
Well, I mean, I used to really enjoy and love him as an actor, and my views are of him as even just like, you know, a fan of his work in the past is he's completely tainted. I don't want to watch anything he makes, and I'm sure that there are people that probably were in my position that really enjoyed his work and then that feel that way too. So maybe, I don't know how it's going to affect his career, but I don't think it's, I mean, this is, not only will I not really want to watch his future movies, but if I was an actor, I wouldn't want to work with him because he's like a liability.
Let's not go into that too much. Yeah, I mean, I just don't want to be too...
That's just my opinion as someone who watched his films and had enjoyed them. But you could edit that out.
No, you can't. But I did see on his Instagram someone that had him on her show, I think, or he had her on his show, and I think she's got. I can't remember if it was I can't remember if it was something 100,000 Instagram followers. And I did think, you know, in terms of influencers, you must be thinking this is going to be good for me or it's not, kind of thing. But anyway, I just want to wrap up just by saying, so True Jedi Forever's thanked Stephanie for being here. It's just like, thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, Stephanie.
Oh,
thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so thanks a lot for being here. I've just got a last question for you. Do you ever grow sweet peas in your garden?
Sweet peas.
Do you know that they sort of grow onto other plants, and they sort of
no, I don't think we've grown sweet peas.
So when I started
out my garden,
yeah. So when I started out my garden, I planted quite a few things, but one of the things I planted was sweet peas, and what's quite amazing with them is on a day-to-day basis. So you can actually see how their fingers are making their way. You know, you can see that it's grown that much. They grow really quickly. You can see how they're reaching towards something and how they are kind of winding their way. It's not like, yeah, and so you get a real sense of this vegetative energy of reaching towards something, and sometimes it'll have like a little tendril going like this, you know, and trying to find something, and they make quite nice flowers. But that's quite interesting, just almost like seeing the plant grow almost like in real time. You don't have that with too many plants. You know, flower opens and so on, but with them you get a real sense of its life, of its intention, of its determinism, which is quite interesting. So when spring comes, maybe you should try sweet peas.
I will.
Okay. Thanks again, Stephanie. Thanks a lot for being here. Thanks to our mods, Sharon. Ria, we've missed you.
This is later for you guys.
Yeah. And also thanks for the super chats, and thanks for all of your comments. Someone did say something about how horrible members only things are, because you know you can have 180 people in chat and they can't say anything, but we don't really want to talk to 180 people. It's difficult, and sometimes you have 30 of those people criticizing you and saying, I think you're wearing a horrible shirt today, and then it just puts you off your game, kind of thing, So
I think we had a really great chat that was very respectful, and as I said, they had some really great comments to add to our discussion.
Yeah, so I don't know, for me, I've been in a bit of a fragile place a little bit. I'm feeling a lot better and stronger, but it's just like, I don't really want to deal with all that negativity and sniping. And so I quite enjoy the members only thing, just because the people who are here really want to be here, they're interested, and so that's it's kind of a safe place. PW says, great shirt. Oh, really? Okay. I don't know whether you said that at the same time I said something else, but I appreciate it. Sharon says, this is the perfect soiree. Yeah. No negativity zone. Yeah. So we must do the watch party. This is 2 of us on StreamYard, but as far as I know, we can have as many as 10. So we might do some more of you members participating. I don't know if we'll watch the whole of Loving Vincent. Maybe we'll watch 10 minutes or something, and then another 10 minutes or something. Because I don't know if you want to show the whole movie. I don't know if we can really do that too much, but definitely something that we can try, I think. So,
hear me now or no?
What?
Can you hear me now or no?
Yeah.
Okay. I guess it's because they just died.
How is it? So I think when we conclude the Van Gogh finale, the Van Gogh series, we'll do the watch party.
Oh, good. These will work.
Okay. Sharon says, loving Vincent, link above. Thanks so much for that, Sharon. Okay, guys, thanks for joining us. Stephanie, thanks for almost 3 hours of just blah, 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 blah. Thanks very much for that.
I can blah, blah, blah a lot, so I hate goodbyes, so you got to lead us out.
PW says, loving Vincent was magical and left me with such sadness for Vincent. Yeah, that's well said. Okay, guys. Again, thank you for being here. Stephanie, thank you. And I'll see you guys next time. Good night,
Ciao.
Lynn. Ciao. Thanks, Stephanie.